Good afternoon to everybody. I'm so happy to be here, and I thank CEB for this terrific opportunity to present to the CEB community today. I guess before we get started, I give a caveat that I'm in no way, shape, or form the virtual law practice guru. However, I think during this time, many of us are just looking for ways to give back to our communities and to stay involved and engaged. So when this opportunity arose to present, I most certainly did not shy away. And I look forward to having this conversation with you guys today. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started here. Just so you know, I'm sharing my slides with you from my tablet, and at the conclusion of the webinar, CEB will make these slides available as well if you would like. So, okay, so in terms of remote and virtual work, generally speaking, there was a recent Gallup poll here, very relevant and timely, and it noted that somewhere around 51% of Americans worked remotely at the peak of the pandemic, which was around April of 2020. So that's over half of Americans working remotely. Obviously, there's been reopenings and more shutdowns. Is it a looming shutdown potentially to get this under control? But of those that are still working remotely, this poll also concluded that about 2/3 of those would like to continue to do so in the near future. So I think this is very important because what it tells us is if you're already working virtually, you're in good company. If not, or if you're thinking about it, I think as society as a whole, we can expect to see this kind of upward trend toward virtual work. So I think we tried to set up a poll here. I'm not sure if we were able to do it. Let me communicate here with Ayani, but I was trying to get a sense of what everybody, in terms of the participants, what they're doing, if they, are in private practice, government, other, maybe not a traditional legal job. I wanted to get a sense of what our participants are, what capacity they're currently working in, one, and then secondly, I wanted to know which participants, if any, are currently practicing virtually or not. So let me check in with Ayani to see if we're able to set that up before we carry forward.
We don't have the poll feature set up right now, but if folks want to drop their answers in the chat or the QA box, I can read those out loud for you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, so don't be shy. Feel free to drop a chat there. Let us know, are you a solo practitioner? Are you working at a law firm? Do you work for the government? And then secondarily, are you currently in any capacity practicing law virtually, either full-time, part-time, a hybrid?
Looks like we've got Tony who says they're a solo practitioner practicing virtually. Someone else, yeah, we got a couple coming in. 2-person office, in the office, solo practitioner. Yeah, a lot of folks are solo and full-time virtual right now. Steve says solo practice, staying virtual, private practice to attorney partnership. Some folks are split in court and virtual. Some small firms. So yeah, that seems to be the consensus.
Okay, terrific. So I think, suffice it to say, making an assumption here, many of us were probably using virtual law practice for efficiency's sake. I see a lot of solo practitioners on here, like myself, right? We want to be efficient, work smarter, not harder, so to speak. But I think now, certainly with these times and the pandemic, we're kind of being forced to further implement maybe some of these virtual practices that we had already started to beforehand. So, okay, well, thank you for sharing that. But I thought this statistic was important to share with you as well before carrying on. So let's discuss a little bit how the State Bar of California defines virtual law practice or virtual law firm. And I took this from the website, and there's a link here in the slides, again, that will be shared with you. But the State Bar of California says a virtual law firm is a legal practice that does not have a bricks and mortar office right? So your traditional front door office, but rather it operates from homes or satellite offices of the lawyers, usually delivering services to clients at a distance using technological means of communication. So that's how the state bar defines it. And again, I provided this link there. And I think this link is important because, again, another caveat as we discuss virtual law practice this afternoon is that depending on your jurisdiction, I assume most of you are in California, if not all, we are bound by ethics, right? So it's very important to always consider the ethics and the state bar as a backdrop in all that we are doing as attorneys. And certainly, utilizing technology doesn't absolve us of this responsibility. In fact, at that link, you'll find, I feel like there's a lot of opinions from other jurisdictions referenced at that link, but I found one, I believe it's an advisory opinion out of California. It's only about 7 pages. And in essence, it says, the state bar does not preclude us from practicing virtually. However, it says that the standards that apply to traditional practice certainly still apply to virtual law offices. And in fact, there might be a duty to take further steps to ensure that we are practicing ethically, so to speak. So I would check out that link at any time, for guidance. If you're thinking about taking some steps and you want to know if it complies with state bar practices, or if you're currently engaging in certain activities that you're uncertain of, that might provide some guidance as well. So I throw that out there now so that we don't have to keep talking about it later. So how has the legal profession adopted to technology? Well, I provide another link here to the Harvard Law Record. It's a short article, and I provided this one in particular. There's many out there actually spanning back 10, 20 years on law and technology, but I thought this one was very timely, just again, given the times that we're living in. But in essence, the article highlights that the legal profession, yes, has been very slow to adopt to technology for various reasons, much of it having to do with risk. Again, think the ethics, right? We worry sometimes as professionals, legal professionals, our minds are trained to issue spot everything that could potentially go wrong. And as lawyers, we sometimes tend to do that, not just in our work, but in everything else, right? So there's that component to it. Obviously, there's a learning curve aspect, and many attorneys and firms just are not willing to dish out the resources or feel they might not have the time to send their lawyers to trainings or make the time and money commitments to test out these new forms of technology. So it's not so much the technology itself or that lawyers are unable to work with that technology, but rather how the profession overall feels about it. There was also references in this article, which I thought were interesting, that there's kind of this stigma too to this technology because sometimes there's this perception that, okay, people that shouldn't be practicing law are maybe the ones using certain technology to prey on certain communities. So now if we have lawyers using this technology, I don't know, it's kind of like this stigma. So those have been some cited challenges here as to why maybe the legal profession has been slow to adopt. So many of the things that I'm going to talk about today are, services and software and programs, devices, what have you, that I think many industries have been using for a long time, but for the legal profession is still fairly new. And for people that have not been comfortable with it, I think, again, because of the times we're living in, there's going to be this trend of being forced to get comfortable with it, right? Because we want to not just survive, we want to thrive. So to do that, we need to adapt with the times. And certainly right now with the pandemic and social distancing, the reality is that I think it depends on our practice areas, but I myself, I do estate planning, and then I do a lot of probate work in and around LA County. So we're talking about conservatorships, probates, guardianships. And the truth of the matter is despite how challenging these last several months have been for all of us, the reality remains that folks are still in need of legal services, right? Yeah, I saw some family law practitioners here comment in the chat box, right? So certainly people are still needing child custody, child support modifications. People are still dissolving their marriages, for instance. In my case, I've had a handful of matters, where parents are dying and leaving children, without care. So we need to institute legal guardianships to have somebody step in and care for these children. I've had many people still very interested in setting up their estate plans. Of course, how we carry out the legal work and the business has dramatically changed overnight, right, to comply with social distancing and make sure we are keeping everybody safe. So there has certainly been a learning curve. I think the new normal will continue to change, and myself, as well as you guys, will continue to adapt. So the title, Savvy Lawyer's Guide to Virtual Law Practice. So what makes a lawyer savvy and able to provide virtual legal services? In my opinion, honestly, I think, you don't have to be like, super smart or bold, but rather it's really just a willingness to try new things. And that encompasses, systems, processes, technology, and then a willingness to refine what's working, what's not working, and then a willingness to keep doing that over and over and over. Because I have found over the years, certain things have worked for me and I've consistently kept them over the years. And then the things that have not worked for me or that I felt can work better, I've been willing to dive in and try something new. So that boils down to being adaptable and flexible, having just that grit and that determination. And I think this last one is really important. I think it's more of a mindset. And again, I think for attorneys, it's very difficult, but I think there has to be this focus on being exceptional and excellent, right? Versus perfect. And again, that's so hard because of the standard that we are held to as attorneys, because of our training in law school, right? Everything we went through to pass the bar, there is this notion or expectation, I think sometimes unspoken, that attorneys have to be perfect in everything we do. And I mean, I respect that that's a wonderful thing to strive for, but for me, what's helped me take action and steps forward instead of being crippled by everything has to be perfect is, okay, I'm going to do my very best. I'm going to be great at it as best I can. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to try something new. And that's just kind of the mindset I've adopted. And I provided a quote here from Van Gogh. It got a little bit cut off, but basically, I keep on making what I can't do yet in order to learn to be able to do it, right? So you have to be willing to try, refine, and repeat. And I think if you're willing to do that, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. So once you've considered the ethics of your jurisdiction and you decided you want to take a leap forward and maybe either institute a full-blown virtual practice or a hybrid. I'd like to say I have a hybrid kind of office, right? Or you're just going to implement certain components of a virtual law practice, like the technology, so to speak. I think the definition of what virtual practice is different for everybody. And I think it's going to continue to change, but certainly you need some sort of office presence or an address, right, where you can receive mail from the state bar. If you're doing court cases, oftentimes you get correspondence from the court. So that's where I think this decision is important, right? So I think of these options, the commercial lease is obviously involves the highest commitment. Many commercial leases, from what I've learned from personal experience and from my colleagues, sometimes require you to sign on for 5 years. And that can be very, very scary for some folks, right? Sublease, what I mean by that is sometimes when you're starting out your practice or maybe trying to move to virtual, maybe you want to consider paying a small fee to another attorney that's maybe more established to borrow their office. either a couple times a week, or whatever the case may be, for the occasional meeting. And that might be one way to offset some overhead, right? And then we have what's considered usually the full-blown virtual. And again, I'm not endorsing any companies, organizations, brands, technologies that I'm mentioning today for purposes of this presentation. Rather, I just mentioned them as examples, so that if you're heading down this road or you need to do your research, I think these names that I've mentioned are good starting points and can lead you to other names that would maybe help you make the best informed decision for your firm, for your practice. So usually what's considered full-blown virtual offices are these places like Barrister Suites, Regis, WeWork. And again, I'm sure they've been very impacted right now with the pandemic. But so when I started, I did a sublease. One of my friends in Torrance, where my current physical office is at, had a more established practice. I would pay her. I would have my occasional meeting. I was getting my mail there. Once I outgrew that, I moved into a Regis space where pretty much I was paying a couple $100 a month, maybe, to be able to use their address and to have occasional office meetings. Eventually, I outgrew that, and I decided to go with a more traditional commercial lease, which I have now. I just started my third year at that location. So again, that was a higher, commitment, but it just gave me the flexibility of not having to worry about competing with other people for space, and I could just come and go as I please, basically. But now with the pandemic, and even prior to the pandemic, since I do so much of my work remotely, I'm hardly at the office. I mean, prior to the pandemic, I was there maybe half a week, if that. Currently, I go maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, and that's to pick up mail, really. Because of the pandemic, again, I do estate planning. So a lot of my execution meetings, we've been implementing CDC and social distancing requirements. So I'm not letting people come into my office. We've been doing everything outside, masks, everybody brings their own pens. We have this whole system set up. So whether or not I keep that lease long-term is to be determined, but those are some options for you to consider. And then there's people that have none of the above, right? I've heard of some practitioners that have a full-blown home office and only that. And then they'll combine maybe their home office. They don't usually bring clients there, but they'll then do like a post office box, or there's some companies that actually have a physical address, but they kind of serve as a post office box, but it looks a little more official because you don't have a post office box. So people will combine sometimes the home office, that's where they do their work. They don't meet clients there. They'll meet them at public places, maybe the law library. But again, this has changed, right, with the pandemic. I know the LA County Bar Association, for instance, and other bar associations let their members use office space for meetings. That's a wonderful tool if and when, we have access to that again in the future. So that's certainly a possibility. I don't have any names for you for the post office box or mailbox service companies, but they are out there. I have found those can be easily found locally. So for instance, again, my commercial space is in Torrance, and there's a handful of post office box services there. So let's say you wanted to set up a home office and you're going to do your work exclusively from home. You can maybe get, for state bar website purposes, one of these post office box services for your address, and then they can help you process mail. And sometimes these Barrister Suites, Regis, WeWork have packages as well where they can process your mail. I've heard of attorneys using these services where, these entities will scan your mail for you. They'll email it to you on a daily basis. And then if you decide it's something you in fact need, they'll physically send it to your location. Everything else can be shredded, right? So there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to that. And I just throw that out there for folks to think about, right? So in addition to your office space and whether that's going to be, physical, virtual, a hybrid of the two, you're going to want to consider what you're going to use in terms of communicating with your potential clients and clients, right? So if you have a website, which I strongly urge you to get one, even if it's just something simple like I have, honestly, which is a landing page. because it's really like your business card these days. People expect you to have an online presence. So you could do something simple like Wix, Wix. I have I can't even think right now which one I have. Um, but I have something similar where I basically just set it up, and then some people even have live chats on there, right? So that's a way for you to communicate with clients. In terms of your phone, you're going to want to determine, okay, if I have this commercial space, like in my case I do I want to set up, Spectrum or AT&T for business, and pay for that type of service? But if you're not going to physically be there, like I am not, maybe that's not going to be an option for you. And it certainly wasn't for me. But if you are going to be there, you might want to set up such service. Otherwise, there's many ways to do it. I mean, when I started off, I had it, my business set up as a separate cell phone in essence. And the beauty of that is, you could utilize phone answering services like Smith AI, Ruby. There's a handful of them. Lex Reception, LEX Reception, Back Office Betty, and the list goes on and on and on. Again, these are just examples, but in essence, what you could do if you had a cell phone, or if you set up, there's also Google Voice, right? You could set up a number online, whatever the case may be. Ultimately, that number could be forwarded to these agencies, and then they handle your calls for you. And they have various packages. And again, you always want to consider, the ethics behind it and your comfort level. But those services are out there. So you don't actually need, a physical phone in a physical office to be able to communicate with potential clients and clients. Okay, so that's something to think about. And then once you schedule these potential clients, you might want to consider using some sort of app or service to get them calendared and to get these appointments on your calendar and their calendar simultaneously. So some popular ones out there, and again, there's more, are Calendly and Acuity. I think really it just boils down to whatever interface makes you most comfortable and whatever one is most user-friendly for you. So for instance, for myself, I believe I just tried Calendly one day because I heard about it at a webinar that I was at. And I liked it, and I've been using it for years. And it's easy. I could set up multiple event types. So, initial consultation, estate planning, initial consultation, special immigrant, juvenile status, onboarding meeting, final execution and review meeting, for example, right? I could set up all these different types of meetings, 10-minute follow-up call, whatever the case may be. And then I could either by phone on my own or through an assistant, schedule it if I have somebody on the phone live, or I could embed these links to these various calendars on my website or my Facebook page, or share it with somebody, and then they can schedule it on their own time. So it's a quite beautiful system. I believe their starter account is free, but it only lets you do one calendar. And then I want to say it goes up from there, maybe around $15 a month, to be able to do these unlimited calendars. So I think for the investment, it's pretty well worth it. And then if you happen to charge for consults or certain appointments, there's a way to get paid. I believe you can link it to, I want to say it's Square. So that way, if you share this link with said person or persons, they could set up an appointment, process payment at that time. Voila, it's on your calendar, their calendar. It's a very nice, clean system. Email. Are you going to have multiple accounts? You can do, like mine, it's my initials, TG at Teresa Gutierrez Law, but I could have easily done Teresa at Teresa Gutierrez Law, or whatever the case may be. So you're going to have multiple ones. Will there be one for yourself, for your teams? Or are you going to have an info account, info at Teresa Gutierrez Law, or billing at teresagutierrezlaw.com, whatever the case may be. There's different ways to set that up. If you're interested in doing that, I would potentially look at GoDaddy.com. To purchase a domain. Gmail for Business also has a lot of information on how to get a domain, and then how to set up corresponding emails that match that domain. A lot of people, and there's no shame in doing this, I could have easily just done Teresa at gmail.com, whatever the case may be. But I think it has a very nice professional presence when you're able to have a domain and then have emails that match. I think as a lawyer, it helps you look more professional. So I would consider looking into that. And then once you have your email set up, things can get crazy when you're managing your accounts. So I would consider looking into some things like Streak and enrollme.com. And again, these are just examples. There's many others out there, but Streak, for instance, lets you draft, label emails. You can draft emails and then schedule them to go out at future times, right? Sometimes as lawyers, we're working at strange hours of the night, let's say, and maybe we don't want to send an email to a client at 2, 3 in the morning. But that's when we're drafting this email, but we want it to go out the next day at maybe 10 in the morning. So Streak would allow you to set that up nicely. Enrollme.com I have found to be helpful. And again, I've gotten this information from other trainings that I've attended in person over the years. Enrollme.com for me has helped me because I don't know about you guys, but I belong to a lot of listservs, especially through LACPA. And a lot of these listservs are very robust. And I mean, sometimes it feels like there's hundreds of emails coming in a day. So enrollme.com helps you. And again, there's similar services out there. Basically organize. You could do a setting. So basically what happens is when I'm working throughout the day, I no longer get like an email every minute. I get like at the end of the day, a nice little summary of what emails came in, from the trust and estate section, from the immigration section, from the solo section, and then I could go through and review them accordingly. So that helps a lot, right? And we'll talk about later, maybe this isn't something that we as the attorney should be doing, but maybe an assistant can be helping us with these tasks, virtual or other. So we'll get into that shortly, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Here are modes of communication with potential clients and clients continued, right? There's social media too. There's just so much out there these days, right? You have Facebook for business, which I have. So there's a messaging feature there, right? And seldom do clients communicate with me there, but potential clients do. So you want to make sure you have some sort of protocol or system to be checking that, or somebody to help you. There's Instagram for business, right? Twitter, TikTok, and I don't even know if I spelled TikTok right. I'm sorry. I don't use it, but I know a lot of attorneys do. There's Avo, Google My Business. I use those too. LinkedIn, and the list goes on. Again, I think people these days and again, right now with the pandemic, so many people are at home, online. So if you're not on these platforms, and you're looking to do virtual, or you are doing virtual, you should be on there, because people are at home and online. And at the end of the day, you want to be noticed. You want people to be able to reach you. So I throw that out there. Look into those. Again, TikTok, I need to look into it. A lot of attorneys are using it and swear by it. All right, so if you're doing virtual, either part-time or full-time, and I'm sorry that I'm rushing through a little bit. I want to leave some time for a Q&A, or for some of you to provide comments and feedback maybe on some of this that you might be using, and what has worked for you, what hasn't. Maybe throw out some names to brands or companies that I've missed that you think might be helpful to the participants as well. So I want to make sure we leave room for that. But virtual or not, you're going to have to manage your case files or the sharing of case information with clients or prospective clients, again, in a way that conforms with state bar or your jurisdiction's policies, right? So you have software these days that can help you do that. Not endorsing any of these, but here they go. Clio's very popular. I've heard a lot of attorneys use Practice Panther, My Case, and really the whole purpose of these forms of software is to help you with the clients from the onboarding process to the end of the case, right? And that includes oftentimes your attorney-client agreements, because if you're doing virtual work, right, if you're working from your house or a Regis office, or Starbucks, again, these days, those environments are limited, right? But I'm just giving examples, whatever the case may be, and you've closed a client, well, how are you going to get the agreement to them? A few weeks ago, I spoke to an attorney friend that was going to mail an agreement to a client. So you can imagine that the lapse between getting the client to want to hire and then actually having them hire, I mean, that could easily turn into a 1 to 2 week process these days with the mail. But if you have these software in place, you could do that so quickly, and you don't even need the software, right? There's other ones like HelloSign, DocuSign. If you're literally just going to send an agreement for a client to sign, that'll work for you. These systems like Clio, for example, has software called Clio Grow and Clio Manage, and I do use both. And actually, Clio Grow used to be Lexicata. Just a little backstory there. So they use, I want to say it's DocuSign or HelloSign. It's like integrated, but the difference is that you can track what's happening with the cases. Did they hire? Did they not? You could create all these labels. Why didn't they hire? Or why did you reject? But ultimately, it's a means by which you can send an agreement digitally, quickly, as long as the clients have access to the link, either through a phone, a tablet, computer, they could sign it, same day, within the hour, within half an hour, whatever the case may be, get it to you, right? And then that's it. You have a new client, and then you can carry forward with whatever system you use to further request documents that you're going to need to get the case started, and so on and so forth. So that's something to look into. And then other things to consider too is, are you going to have some sort of hard drive where you're saving and backing up information? Are you going to use the cloud? I'll tell you right now, I myself use a hybrid of these things, in addition to some paper files. But I have come across some attorneys that say, no, Teresa, I am 100% paperless. So kudos to them. I'm still working on that. There's certain things that I just haven't been comfortable with fully purging after scanning, right? But again, it's going to be based on your practice area, your comfort level, and all those things. But these are really things that you need to think about. I mean, I think it's prudent to have things saved in multiple formats, just given this world that we're living in, given California, right? Natural disasters. We've heard of stories of other places in the country where there have been natural disasters, and for instance, firms that were exclusively paper filed have lost everything, right? So I think it is wise to save things in different formats if possible. Getting paid, right, goes hand in hand with onboarding clients. I just throw LawPay on here as an example, but similar to these agreements that you could send by link, LawPay is essentially a system that lets you send invoices to clients by email. You can share links with them too. And I think it's very popular amongst lawyers because it allows you to have links for, let's say, a trust account, but also an operating account, right? So if you're working hourly cases where clients need to put down a retainer, LawPay lets you distinguish which account that retainer will go to, for instance, or if you're doing flat fee work and it's going to go straight to operating, LawPay lets you send that specific link to those specific clients. So LawPay is popular with attorneys because it helps attorneys conform with state bar requirements. So that's something to look into. I'll mention a few others just because I know attorneys sometimes use them. So there's a Square, right? There's Zelle, Venmo, but it's kind of what you're comfortable with at the end of the day. And a lot of people prefer to use LawPay because I've heard it's harder for somebody to contest or dispute a fee and then try and claw it back later. Versus some of these other ones I mentioned, it might be easier for folks to do that. So you'll want to research that. But these systems, in essence, allow you to onboard somebody without having to be face-to-face. So I think if you're trying to go virtual or you are virtual, that's something you want to look into. And certainly right now with the pandemic, if you weren't doing this before, it's something you might want to consider because it can help you get started and moving on cases quicker than if you have to be mailing out agreements. And it can help keep you and your clients safe, right? Minimizing that in-person contact if it isn't necessary. So that's something to consider. So like what tools and equipment are you going to use to utilize all these types of services we've talked about, right? Do you need a scanner? How about some tablets, printers, fax, phones, internet? I mean, I think, again, this is all very practice sensitive, right? It depends what area of law you do. I do estate planning. So, sometimes I have very voluminous estate plans, 100 pages plus. So at one point I had invested in it's called a Fujitsu IX500. It's not a terribly big scanner, but it's not that small either. It does fold nicely. And the reason I invested in that is because I wanted nice, clean PDFs. And then this scanner happened to integrate nicely with, you remember these platforms I was talking about back here, Clio, Practice Panther, MyCase. So that scanner, the Fujitsu IX500, happened to integrate nicely with my client management platform, where I could scan a document straight into my software without having to save it on the computer first and then upload it. So it was for, efficiency's sake. And then I also at one point invested in an Epson scanner, which was the size of maybe like a 3-hole punch, maybe a little smaller. And that one has always been helpful for court. I could fit it in my briefcase if I just want to scan a document, into my computer. It was very helpful. Talking about tablets, now I have an iPad here. So remember at the beginning, I said, really virtual practice, I think, has taught me that you have to focus on being excellent and exceptional and not perfect, right? So with my tablet, there is a scan feature that I've used, and maybe it's not as clean or perfect and crisp as the Fujitsu IX500 would give me, but it's good enough. It's clean, and it works, right? So now I don't really carry, those scanners around. I just have my iPad, and if I have to scan something at court, or if I'm out in the field, meeting with a client, I scan it, and it makes my life easier. Perfect? No, but easier. So that's how you have to think. And then you have to think about, obviously there's things like, if you haven't noticed, I'm an Apple person. So, I have the iPad, I have the iPhone, hopefully the iWatch soon. I love those products because they all sync together, the calendars, everything neatly, right? But then there's also the Androids, right? Or Microsoft products and tablets. So you have to think about all those things. So one of my challenges being a Apple user is that I draft a lot of documents and pages, right? And even though I have Office suites and I could export things into PDF and Word, sometimes the person on the receiving end has formatting issues. So that's a challenge that I sometimes continue to work through, but I like my devices. Same thing with printers. Do you even need them? I don't know. It depends on your practice area, right? Fax. I've never owned a fax in these years that I've been practicing law, but because I do work with a court system in the probate department that often sends me reports via fax, I do have a service called Ring Central, RingCentral. And again, that's just one of many services. I think there's things like Grasshopper and these other names out there, but I use Ring Central. And in essence, what that service does, it allows me I have a fax number. They issued a fax number to me. So I receive my faxes by email, and then I could fax by email. So if I have a PDF document, I go to my email, and then I punch in the number, 310-548-1111 at ringcentral.com, send off the document, and then I'll get a confirmation saying, hey, your fax was sent, your fax was received. Simple. Or similarly, a couple times a month I get a fax, I'll get a notification in my email. So that's been very helpful. So if you have any need for facts, likely if you're working with court systems like I do, that might be something to consider, so that you don't have to have a physical, fax machine. And again, the phones, we kind of discussed this a little earlier, but, do you really need, AT&T or Spectrum phone there in your office if you're not there? Or are you going to be better off with some sort of cell phone or Google Voice or a combination of those two, plus utilizing some sort of call service, right? We talked about Smith AI, Ruby, Back Office Betty, Lex Reception, and the list goes on and on and on. There's so many service providers, and some of those also provide bilingual services, which I've used some of those in the past, so that's been important to me as I serve the monolingual and bilingual Spanish communities. So if you're serving communities that speak languages other than English, some of those providers might be able to help you. Similarly, internet, right? So as I mentioned, I do have a physical office, so I did want to have reliable internet. So yes, I do pay for internet, but these days you have, Wi-Fi and hotspots, and I think some phone companies, I want to say Verizon, I'm not sure if others do, have these little things. I think they're called jetpacks, don't quote me, but it's literally this device, and they're very reliable, and you pay a monthly fee, and you could set up a nice connection wherever you go. Right. So that's something to consider too. What type of internet are you going to use or need to provide virtual and reliable legal services? Managing your workload and team. It boils down to streamlining and automating. So what's going to help you succeed either in your part-time or full-time virtual law practice is having checklists, templates, handbooks, and maybe you're going to want to do this by case type and or by position, right? Receptionist, secretary, administrative assistant, whatever the case may be. Having these things in place are going to help you not have to reinvent the wheel every time a case comes in, or every time, hopefully you're not experiencing a lot of turnover or having to hire all the time, but let's say you're growing, right? Having these things in place are going to help you train those that are coming in, and it's going to help you be efficient too, because you're not going to be relying on a person exclusively to keep your firm going, but rather you're going to have these checklists and systems that are going to continue regardless of who's at your firm helping you, right? And then with that, I want to add on to it, and this is an issue I think a lot of people are dealing with right now, head on because of the pandemic. Are you going to have on-site or virtual employees? Are they going to be employees or contractors, right? And that's a whole another issue for you to discuss, with your tax professional or employment attorney, right? Whether you're bringing people on as employees or contractors, but we're discussing these roles here for the sake of efficiency in virtual law practice, right? So are they going to be on site where you have to continue paying for a physical office, or now because of social distancing, are they working from home or some other virtual setup, right? So I think oftentimes the question is, okay, I need help. So, where do I find these folks? Where do I find these on-site employees, contractors, or virtual employees or contractors? So I'll say for myself over the years, and I think when you're making this determination, really it boils down to what tasks have to get done, right? As an attorney, as a law firm owner, and I'm sure many of you can relate. The tasks are sometimes endless and many. So you need to decide what has to get done. What do you enjoy getting done? What do you not enjoy? What must you do as the attorney? What can you delegate and give off to somebody else, right? So what do you have to muscle through versus what are you willing to pay someone else to do, basically, is what it boils down to. And, so for myself, I sometimes have a need for translation of documents that maybe earlier on in practice I had time to do, but certainly the last few years, I do not have time to do that. So through other attorneys, they've said, oh, hey, I've worked with such and such persons, contractors offsite. They, work for themselves, do their own thing. They can help. So I have virtually worked with those contractors to help me translate documents, and I've trusted them because they worked with very seasoned attorneys in the community that I respect, right? But then I have people say, you know what, you can easily find virtual help on these platforms. We're living in this gig economy too, and I know that's a whole nother topic in and of itself. But again, I provide these platforms just as examples, not because I'm endorsing or promoting or encouraging you to use them per se, but I've known other people that have. They use these platforms called Upwork and Fiverr, where you can sometimes contract with someone on a project by project basis. Maybe you need help with your website or with business cards or with designing a logo, right? And you don't want to bring on a whole employee to do that, but you can go on these platforms and hire somebody just for that specific project per se, right? So that's how I've known a lot of attorneys to use those platforms. But I've also heard of attorneys that have used those platforms to hire virtual assistants, people that help them on a more ongoing basis, and that it's working out very well for them, right? And then I have some people say, well, I want someone that's like college educated, US based, right? So there's this other platform I've heard of, I think it's called Virtually, and it's spelled just how it sounds, Virtually. And I believe those folks there, I'm sorry, not Virtually, it's called a Zirtual, Z like zebra, IRTUAL, Zirtual. And those folks on that platform are college educated, US based. I think they have some sort of monthly subscription, depending how many hours you need each month. You need 12 hours, so on and so forth, of personal help and assistance. And then you could designate exactly what that boils down to. Are they going to be helping you with emails or mail or whatever the case may be? Something a little more in depth. The choice is yours, really based on what your and your firm's needs are. So those are some things to consider. And again, we're talking about this in a vacuum. A lot of information for the short time that we have today, but things to think about, services, platforms to consider as we are setting out to be virtual law offices or considering enhancing what we have in place. Pros and cons to virtual practice as we wrap this up. I mean, some pros, obviously, from working from home, not having to drive into a traditional office, include a minimized commute time, minimized wear and tear on your mind and body, less dry cleaning, right? All those things, easier ability to juggle your outside of work responsibilities like children, partners, pets, extracurriculars, and so on. Some cons, minimal interaction, with others. Sometimes there can be issues creating boundaries, right? If you're, working at home, sometimes it's that fine line. Okay, when does work start? When does work end? You might succumb to this always on mentality. So we really need to, if we're doing a virtual practice, reconcile these things so that virtual practice can work for us, right? So maybe we create blocks of time when we're most productive. If we have children, maybe that's before they wake up, the first half of the day, or maybe it's the night or the evening. If we have the space in our home, assuming that's where our virtual office is at, maybe we're going to designate a certain room, closet, office, whatever the case may be these days, to do our work so that we can more easily turn it on and off and not have all these kind of, blurred lines happening. But if we don't have that separate space, like an office or a closet that we can use for work only, then maybe, we're going to have a little station that we set up and put away each day, so that our work's not always looking at us and our families, and we're able to have these kind of more healthy boundaries. I think that's something that we should bear in mind if we're heading toward virtual law practice, or again, as we're considering ways to enhance our current virtual practice experience. we're going to get into some questions and answers, or again, comments. I want to hear from you guys about some of the stuff that you're using or stuff that I did not mention, but there's a lot of resources out there these days on virtual practice. I've provided just some links here. The first one I got from the ABA website. The second one, myshingle.com, I believe that attorney's name is Carolyn Oliphant, I want to say. I might be mispronouncing it, but she, I think, runs an organization called Solo Practice University. So there's a lot of information out there on solo practice, law firm management, including virtual law firm management. Ali Lozano of alilozano.com. I have a few of her books. I've done a few of her webinars. She has some podcasts out there with, I think, very important, relevant information on virtual law practice. Sonia Lakhani also. And what I like about these three is that they have some free resources, paid resources, but ultimately, I think it's terrific because all three of those individuals that I mentioned are actual practicing attorneys. So they're not just doing like coaching and saying, hey, this works, this doesn't. They're actually out there doing it. So as somebody who's myself constantly looking for ways to improve my practice and virtual law practice, I really respect that, when individuals are actually putting into practice what they're preaching in essence. So that's why I shared those links. But again, there's tons of resources out there. And again, please do not forget earlier, again, these slides will be shared with you. I want to say it was up here. So the second slide, I provided a link to the State Bar of California's website, again, where there's, certain opinions on virtual law practice that I think you might find helpful. Again, the ABA website, the American Bar Association, also has links to, just a wealth of resources that I think might be helpful to everybody as you're looking for ways to get out there and embrace this new era we're living in and the technology to help you do it. And again, like, I guess my final thoughts are, just be willing to try new things and be willing to dispense with it if it's not working for you, and try something else. I think that's the bottom line here, is to always be willing to move forward, and don't get caught up on trying to be perfect, the first time around. Be willing to test and refine until you're happy with something. And I think that's it. We're getting ready to wrap up. So I'll turn it over to Ayani.
Hey, so it looks like we have a question from Dana, and it was from a few slides ago. And they say that they were under the impression that we're still required to get and give original signatures on fee agreements. And so they were hoping if you could point them to the rule or code that is allowing that change.
And just to clarify, Dana, maybe you could throw it in the chat box there. When you say fee agreements, do you mean attorney-client agreements?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I can't cite to the rule off the top of my head, but I do remember this having come up at a seminar that I once attended. And my understanding is it might be the Business and Professions Code, but do not quote me. This is probably something I could look into and maybe somehow through CEB, Ayani, share it with the participants. My understanding is that the digital signatures have the same impact contractually as a wet signature.
Got it.
And someone in the comments here, let's see, might have a little more insight offhand than myself. Let me check. Someone just said, evidence code, perhaps. E-sign laws are probably what you're referring to. Yeah, we'll have to dig a little deeper into that to give you a more concrete answer. And again, hopefully we can share that following today's discussion.
Thanks, Dana, for your question. And then we've got an anonymous question, someone wondering if you have any suggestions on newsletters.
On newsletters. Off the top of my head, I've heard a lot of people use MailChimp, I want to say,
Yep.
MailChimp.
Mhm.
And again, that's just one of many possibilities. But right, you can, I believe there's templates in there where you could set that up. And then also I've heard of people going through some of these other platforms that I mentioned, Upwork, Fiverr, and finding somebody on there, like on a contract basis, to help them get that set up, even in MailChimp, right? So if you don't have the time to teach yourself, you might consider hiring somebody on one of those platforms, or maybe I saw somebody mention earlier, this is news to me, like I guess you can post these type of opportunities on platforms like Instagram. I'm assuming much like you could on Craigslist, or sometimes if you're not comfortable with some of these websites like Upwork or Fiverr, lots of times colleges and universities, I'm sure certainly now with the pandemic, students are probably hungry for experience in getting real life work done out there. So you might want to contact a local college or university if that makes you more comfortable, to see if there's a way to post an opportunity for a student that would maybe want to set that up for you as well. That might be an option.